Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, welcome to the show. Today is a Doctor is In episode, meaning I will do my very best to answer listener questions. Today's questions have been posed by parents of choir members from my choirs here in Savannah, Rise Chorals. But before we jump into all the things the parents want to know about choir, I want to say thank you. As we look back on 2020, this is the last Doctor is In episode for the year for me. I just want to say thank you. Without you listening and showing your support, whether sending messages on social media or text or just downloading and listening to this, thank you. This wouldn't be possible without you. It has been an absolute honor to explore podcasting, to learn about sound engineering. Thank you for being patient if you have been here from the beginning and I have learned how to edit the sound better. Thank you so much for being with me as I learn how to interview and cold call guests to be on the show. It is an honor to look back at the 50-ish episodes that we have released in 2020, and I can't wait to see what happens in years to come. I promise we will continue to publish episodes every Tuesday, that we are listening to questions that you have and seeking out guests who can help answer them. And together, we will continue to explore ways that music really matters and how we can use that as music educators and as music lovers. This episode is partially possible because back in the summer when we were all collaborating and getting together and figuring out all the possible things we could do, I was having a coffee date with someone who reached out on social media, obviously a Zoom coffee date because, COVID. And they were sharing something that they had found a lot of success in. They had a family support group virtually. They had found that a lot of their family members were also alone a lot, just like the singers were. And by offering a time where the families could get together, they would become more friends, they were having fun, and they were also getting to have camaraderie. I loved this idea, especially because maybe it's an extroverted quality that I have. Maybe it's just because I love people, but I love my choir parents, y'all. These families, I seriously feel like I'm part of their family, and it is such a joy to be a part of them. And I missed them, and I didn't realize I missed them until this guest that I was having coffee with said, "We have family support group time." And I thought, oh my goodness, that's genius. I would love to spend time with these parents. So Rise offers once a month family support groups. Sometimes people bring wine to their Zoom meetings. Sometimes they're in the car driving home from work. Sometimes they're shopping in the grocery store. You never know what the parents are doing, but they tune in and we have 30 minutes of time together the first week of every month. And sometimes I bring in guest speakers. We've had social workers and people to help with mindfulness and dealing with some of the struggles of COVID. We've had motivational speakers. We've had just fun times of icebreakers and getting to know each other and unpacking things that are going on in our lives. Well, this final parent support group we just had, I asked them if they would contribute questions to this episode. So these questions are coming directly from the parents of my choir. Surprise, surprise, their number one question revolved around repertoire. Where do we get it? Why do we choose it? There's a really good one about movement. You'll have to stay tuned for that. Another parent asked about voice lessons and how important that is, and I have some research on that. And another parent asked how we decide how to teach, and it's very interesting to hear what they're thinking. So thank you for allowing me to make a podcast. Thank you for listening. I am so sincerely grateful for this opportunity. Of course, none of this would be possible without your help if you're over on Patreon. Thank you so much for being a patron. I love getting to talk to you every month. It's also made possible from our friends over at Kennison Choral Company. Remember, you too can save 20% off your purchase using the code MUSICMatters at checkout, especially as you are planning your repertoire for the spring. Go check out their rehearsal files because they are dynamite. Now, the last Doctor is In episode of 2020, I bring you The Doctor is In, questions from choir parents.
I wanted to know how directors choose the songs because having two girls in choirs, I'm hearing the exact same songs like over and over and over again. And I kind of want to know when and where they get new music from.
Repertoire selection. Man, that's a doozy. We take a lot of classes on that, actually. Choral lit classes, it's usually a integral part of the secondary music methods class. Picking repertoire is both a personal thing and something that has been studied a lot. So let's break it down. First of all, each choir director is going to approach this differently because every director has a different why behind their choir. And every director has different singers in their group. So what I'm about to share, this is my personal opinion, and guess what? It could change because that's important. You have to be able to look at both the academic side and the entertainment side and the social side. So there's a lot to really unpack here. So let's start from the beginning. For me, a big part of repertoire selection is how entertaining is the final product going to be for the people in the audience. Because if they're entertained, then I know the singers will be entertained because that I can make sure happens in rehearsals. But that's not my only driving force because I also have short-term and long-term goals. First of all, what do my singers need this semester? What vocal techniques do they need to be working on? What music reading or music literacy skills do they need to advance to? What do they need in regards to style and time period? And what's going on in the world, and how can we use our choir repertoire to unpack that together? Because we are so lucky that choir is that space that you can really have these great conversations. At least that's what we're seeing in these really weird COVID times, if not before, but definitely now. So I look at the short-term goals, and then I look at the long-term goals. Let's say a singer is in my choir for 4 years or 6 years. What do I want them to experience? What languages do I want them to have experienced before they leave choir? What time periods? What appetizers and entrees? That's actually a really good way to look at it too. I had a professor once say that your concert should be like going to a very fine multi-course meal. You're going to have some type of appetizer, some type of palate cleanser. You'll have a main dish and you'll have some side dishes and you'll have a dessert and maybe there'll be candles at the end. You never really know, or maybe that coffee or cappuccino, whatever your thing is. So you want to make sure that you're not serving the same thing at every meal. It shouldn't be a formula. It's not just a list of boxes that you check. It should never be the exact same because there's too many variables. What do your singers need? What does your audience need? What does your community need? So that's how I approach repertoire selection. And filling in those pieces and making a concert, that's where it gets interesting. And to kind of go back to the question this parent asked about why they hear the same songs over and over, that can be for a few reasons. There are some really awesome quote-unquote staples that are known for being good tone builders. That's the sound quality that comes out of your choir. They're known for being good for building music literacy or independence. There's some of those songs that are just choir classics that you're going to hear. There's also the fact that a lot of us get ideas from attending conferences. So if there's a piece that was a big hit at a conference, you'll probably hear that a couple times. If there's something that was in a reading session that was a big hit, sometimes that's how things get circulated and redone from choir to choir. But it's also just, we talk to each other. Repertoire selection is a never-ending black hole of awesomeness that you can dive into. Whether you're following a certain time period or a certain composer or a certain style, I think the key here is variety and time for exploring. I know that if I wait till the last minute, I don't have the best repertoire selected. And I think that flexibility is also a big thing here. Being willing to program something and then say, that might not be right for my choir right now, and moving on and not forcing a piece. This is a very fine line though, I must say. Sometimes a piece is hard. There's always a place for that piece that when your choir opens it, they're like, we can't do this. And you unpack it together. And in the end, it becomes your favorite piece, almost always. I think of Sicut Cervus. I taught the Sicut Cervus back in 2011 and 12 when I was taking a community children's choir over to Italy. And they hated it. everything about it. They hated count singing it. They hated solfeging it. They hated learning the words. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we did these little quartets to kind of hold them accountable for learning their parts and just give them a place where they could show what they had learned, because I felt like they didn't realize how genius they were from learning the Siku Chervus. And it just clicked, and that became the song that they always wanted to sing. If we were in an echoey chamber on choir tour, can we sing the Siku Chervus? If we were on the steps doing an encore, can we sing the Siku Chervus? It became the favorite. And in the beginning, it was super hard. So to answer the question, there are a million different directions you can go with finding repertoire. For me, it's about making a variety, creating a beautiful table like a dinner that you're coming to with a variety of flavors and weight of food. I think it's important to think about your singers, your community, and your audience. And I think flexibility is key. Being aware that you can't force, in my opinion, you can't force something into a group. It has to be a really fine line between, yes, you need to learn this Bach, and yes, it's going to be hard, but why this one? Why did you pick that piece by Bach? What does the text tell us? What does the full work tell us? Now, we could go into tons of detail about the variety of lengths. I think it's also important, especially for our young singers, to not just sing short little song after song after song. I also think it's important to look at the accompaniments, making sure that there are varieties in those accompaniment parts, and including instruments whenever possible, just so singers get the variety and the experience of performing with different sounds. There's just so much to think about, and so I am sorry, my parent who asked this question, that you have heard some of the same songs over and over. I promise that I'm trying to bring you the most variety as possible, but all of us are in this from a different perspective, and sometimes the songs are just so good you can't help but do them. I hope this helps, and I'd love to hear what your programming thing is. How do you select repertoire? What's the favorite thing that you've done this year? Or if you're a parent or a music lover, what's your favorite piece of music to hear on a concert? That's a hard question. I might not be able to answer that one, but I hope I've answered this question. Let's go on to the next. It's kind of along the same lines as repertoire selection.
When do you decide that after you pick the song, you decide, nope, not going to sing that one?
Such a great question, and one that has a different answer a lot. When do you know to keep pushing a piece, and when do you know to step back and let it go? It's a hard question, and I think it has to do with having your pulse on your choir. It's important that we are the leaders of our ensembles, but we also have to be real humans and know what they're going through and what they're experiencing. You don't want to steal the joy, but you also don't want to give in and not make them work for something. So I think it's a fine line. Typically what I do if I'm working on a piece of music and I'm feeling like it's not a good fit with the choir, there's usually one or two pieces every year that happen in this way, let me be honest. I'll usually push through for 2 to 3 rehearsals depending. I might take a week off in the middle there and then bring it back and see if that was what was necessary. I might go back and reteach or represent it in a different light. Those things I'll try, and if it's still not clicking, if there's something that is just not jiving with my singers where they are, I'll typically pull it off and either push it back a semester or just remove it completely. Other times, we'll get all the way to the end of a song, we'll enjoy learning it, we'll enjoy the experience of it, but then we won't perform it. Sometimes it's already peaked and they've moved on from it, they've advanced beyond what that song taught them. Other times, it might just not have the passion or the emotion behind it that I know the singers are capable of bringing to the table. I think the hardest part as a conductor when you decide to either not perform a piece of music or to pull a piece of music is second guessing. Did I make the right decision? Was it my fault for programming it? Was it my fault for how I introduced it or taught it? It's so hard, but I think that it all goes back to having your pulse on the choir. Is this piece of music achieving what it set out to achieve when you selected it and programmed it? That sometimes changes too. Or is it not, and is it time to pull it and move on? Kind of cut your losses and go to the next direction. I hope this helps.
How do you decide as a director if a certain song is going to be a a song where the choir's moving instead of just standing very stoically and singing? When do you decide that this is a song, we're going to do a little dance, we're going to maybe do some movements, be a little more animated?
Have you ever watched a choir perform and you just can't stop watching? They're engaged from head to toe. When I think of this, I think of Dr. Martha Shaw and Spivey Hall Children's Choir. They sing from their bones, and you can feel it. And Dr. Shaw teaches them how to do that. It's a learned skill. You have to learn the toolbox of singing expressively in a group, whether that's the head nod or the lean in, or I call it the bobblehead. And it has to authentically align with the music. So, movement. How do we know when a piece needs it or doesn't need it? It's a philosophical question in a way. It's a philosophy of choral education. I love it when my singers move. I never want them to hold still because I can't hold still. So I think there is a part of me that is always striving to teach them how to empathize with the music and to use their bodies to tell the story. But we don't want them to oversell. It's like when you're going to a place to get something to eat and someone's told you how fabulous it is, and then it's just kind of meh, you know. You don't want to do that. You don't want to oversell and be inauthentic in your movement. So I think teaching the singers how to share their emotions and their singing experience and their singing journey through a piece of music, the story they want the audience to see, feel, and hear, that can be translated through what I call choral movement, with the head nods and the lean-ins and the bobbleheads and all of those things you've seen in those choirs that you just can't look away from. But every so often, there is a piece that requires choralography. Sometimes it's in the score. I haven't done a piece of music with choralography in the score since, I think, White Winter Hymnal, where it had the body percussion parts, or Bring Me a Little Water, Sylvie, bring me a little water now. That has some body percussion parts that go with it. So sometimes it's written in and it's part of the story. Sometimes the music is from an experience, it's part of the story of the song that you should walk to it. I'm thinking of Sia hamba kokenyani quicos, Sia hamba kokenyani quicos. We are marching is what that song is saying. And so having some feet marching movement makes sense because it aligns with what the song translates to. The part that we are responsible for is knowing what is authentic and appropriate for the piece of music. So how do we decide if a piece needs movement? Well, I think all music needs a little bit of movement, because have you ever seen a first violinist play and hold still? Or a flautist? Or what about an oboe? Have you ever seen anyone in the orchestra play and hold completely still? Same is true with choir. I don't think you should ever hold completely still. But adding actual movements or choreography, that is determined by the piece of music, where it comes from, what its purpose is. Will it bring the piece to the next level authentically? Will it help the singers experience the piece more wholeheartedly? We actually program our concerts to use the entire space in which we are singing in. We even did that with the virtual concert, but that's a whole nother episode. We program using the entire space. So we'll start in the back, or we'll start in a balcony. We'll do something in the round and surround the audience. We'll do something in the front or to one side, and all of the movement is all part of the singing experience. So there's never just quiet downtime walking. There is a piece that is intentionally selected for moving to the next location. And that location is selected because we're either going to have a movement or we have some type of something that is enhancing the song. But it also makes the experience more than just watching a choir stand in front, which is not a bad thing, but I need to move a lot. So that kind of comes out in my choral concerts. And so my choirs move to lots of different directions, and it gives the audience a full, almost 4D experience. So that's my personal opinion on movement. I'm sure there is a ton more that we can unpack, but that's the quick version. If it enhances the song and if it's authentic, we will move. And that's that.
How important is voice training in like private lessons independently to being a member of a choir?
Voice lessons. I could probably say this is the number one question I get asked. When should my child start taking voice lessons? And this can go a lot of different directions, and I know a lot of different directors come from different approaches to this. So I'm going to share some of my thoughts. This is not the be-all end-all, but this is what I typically go with. I don't think there is a lot to benefit from voice lessons prior to the voice change, both the girl's voice change and the guy's voice change. There's just so much changing in your mechanism that the techniques and skills you would be developing, I don't know how much more benefit you would get from a one-on-one vocal instruction versus just being in a really well-designed choir setting. Now, when I say well-designed choir setting, we have intentional vocal technique in every warm-up. And that is something that we commit to our families. By being a part of our choirs, you are going to have very similar experiences to the vocal technique and vocal exploration that you would have if you were in a small group voice lesson. That's, I think, important for teaching the age group that I teach, whether that's the middle school, high school age, or the children who are just learning their voices, or the adults that are working on either extending their ranges or keeping healthy vocal techniques. There is a huge aspect of vocal technique in my choral warm-ups. So for the younger singers especially, I don't think voice lessons are necessary. Now, if you're looking to do something outside of just normal singing, that's a different story. I have some friends who really do great at coaching Broadway. They do fantastic at coaching music theater. And if you're going to be doing something that requires that much physicalness behind your voice, not just your normal choral singing, I think that that could be a case. But really, I don't find it that required until you start getting into that high school-ish age and beyond. I think if you are a singer who knows they want to pursue a degree in music, or if you just want to really enhance your instrument, there is a lot to be learned in the private voice setting. I would say, especially once your voice changes for girls and guys, there is so much that can be done one-on-one with a voice specialist. We, as choir teachers, know the voice, but there is something extra special. So I think that it can enhance a singer's experience. It's kind of, I know a lot of great choral programs that highly suggest voice lessons. And I think that's important because you learn how to show up to rehearsal with your voice already warmed up, or what to do when you're singing and you hit a spot in the music that the director might not directly address. So there are pros and cons for both. My number one answer to parents is if your child has not had the voice change, it's not 100% necessary to have outside lessons. They're getting all of the healthy vocal technique they need in rehearsal, at least in my rehearsal. And once they have the voice change, working with a one-on-one voice teacher really can be beneficial, but you need to make sure you know why they're doing it. Is it because they want to enhance their instrument? Is it because they're thinking about music as a career? I think those would be the reasons that I would really get behind that. Is it that they want to be a leader and contribute more to the singing in their communities? That's cool too. But I think you really need to do your research into the backing of your voice teacher and making sure that there's a great relationship between your voice teacher and your choir director, because we're all in this together and we all just want the same thing. We want beautiful music and great people that continue to sing for a lifetime, because we all know that music matters. I hope this helps. There is no right or wrong answer. It's going to be unique for every child, but for the most part, choral singing with excellent impact and focus on group voice technique in the warm-ups especially, and in the appropriateness of song selection, will get your singer through that voice change and beyond. There is definitely good reasons to look into private voice instruction if that meets the why behind your child.
How do you work with a choir of different age, even within our, like, let's just say Rise Gals, for example, we have different ages and we have different abilities. So do you kind of teach to the lowest, teach to the highest, teach to the middle, differentiate? Like how do you make that happen so that everybody is growing, even if they are, at different levels?
So I teach secondary choral methods at the university level every spring. And this question is one of those questions that I posed in the beginning. How do you teach something to a room of a variety of interests, ability levels, attention spans. It's one of the best parts of the teaching job, if you ask me. You know how everyone has different jobs and different careers, and everyone talks about their different careers, like, I don't want a desk job or whatever. It's different every day. I love teaching because it is legitimately different every day, because there are so many humans in the room and you never know what they're going to need. So to answer this question, I think it is important as a choral educator that we know where every voice in the room is. It's very much like that Montessori approach. That was my first teaching job, was a Montessori job. And I learned so much about keeping tabs on every individual and knowing where every single singer is on their journey. So the first step is knowing where everyone is, knowing what that spectrum of need is in your choir, and then making sure in each rehearsal you differentiate. You have opportunities to challenge those that need the challenge, to remediate those that need the remediation, either through teamwork and pairing up intentional groups, or through how you're teaching in a sequence, giving options. Okay, you can stick with me here, or you can add this if you're ready for the next level. Okay, you can stick with me here, add this, or do that. Knowing where all your singers are and being, as Dr. Madsen says, 3 steps ahead at all times, knowing that you could go in any possible different direction. So to answer the question, you differentiate your rehearsals by knowing the singers in the room, by knowing where their voices are, by having an idea of what they need musically, and then by planning your rehearsal plan and sequencing to allow for both repetition, remediation, and challenge and extension as needed. I don't really do the whole teach the lower half or teach to the upper half. I just teach all the singers in the room and stay in touch with the ones that need me most. Sometimes an extra email or an extra text message, hey, did you get this concept? Is there anything I can do? Do you want to pop in and have a one-on-one? Sometimes those little things help too, and those help happen outside of rehearsal. But how do I accommodate a room full of all different people at different levels and different abilities? I get to know them, and then it's a blast seeing how to guide them through the process of learning. Thank you for asking such a meaningful question. There you have it. The doctor was in, and she answered questions from choir parents from the Rise chorales in Savannah, Georgia. Ironically, most of them dealt with repertoire and teaching strategies, and I loved it. I'd love to hear your questions. You know, you can hang out anytime. You can shoot me a message on social media. You can join us over at patreon.com/musicedmatters and get it on the monthly meetups and the bonus episodes and all the cool plans for Teacher PD Week 2021. But ultimately, thank you. This is my last Doctor Is In episode of 2020. And thank you. Thank you for letting me be a podcast host and for getting information out there. Obviously, you're listening to the end, so you know that music matters. Whatever you're doing, it really sincerely matters. I wish you the very, very best with whatever you're working on right now, whether that's rest and relaxation or planning and preparation for the next thing ahead. Whatever you're doing, it matters. And I will see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast. Have a great one.